My name is Andrea Anderson. I'm 29 years old, and until recently, I believed loyalty could save anything, even love. I thought if I gave enough, stayed patient enough, and kept showing up, he'd see it. He'd see me. But that night, the night he smirked and said I didn't deserve a man like him, something in me finally snapped. Scott and I had been together for 2 years. He was magnetic, the kind of man who made people turn their heads when he walked into a room. Confident, charming, always with that easy laugh that made you forget how cruel his words could be. I used to admire that about him. Where I was quiet, cautious, he was energy, unpredictable, alive. Together, I thought we balanced each other. But lately, that balance felt more like a weight pressing on my chest. It started small, like all heartbreaks do. "Babe, that dress again," he'd say with a grin. "You know it's cute, but maybe try something a little sexier next time." I'd laugh it off, pretending it didn't sting. Or when I drove him home after work, "You really need a new car. The way this thing rattles, I feel like it's going to fall apart." He said it jokingly, but the way his eyes lingered on the dashboard like I was something cheap said otherwise. At first I told myself that's just how he was teasing, playful. But when the jokes come often enough, they stop sounding like jokes. They start sounding like the truth. He thrived on attention. I could feel it in the way he looked at his phone more than my face, the way he smiled at strangers just a little too long, the way he always had to be noticed. Meanwhile, I was invisible, the one who fixed, who waited, who made things easier. Some nights I'd catch him smirking at his phone thumbs flying across the screen, that secret look like he was part of a conversation I wasn't invited to. When I asked who it was, he'd shrug, "Relax, it's just friends." But his smile said otherwise. I knew the shape of lies, even unspoken ones. That night, the night everything changed, we were having dinner at his apartment. I had cooked like I always did. He barely touched the food, too busy scrolling. His phone kept lighting up. "Scott," I said quietly. "Can you put that away? I'm trying to talk to you." He didn't look up. "I am listening." "No, you're not," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "You're somewhere else lately. It's like I'm talking to a wall." That's when he looked up slowly, lazily, like he was bored of me. His thumb hovered over his screen, that smug little smile forming at the corner of his lips. And then he said it. "You don't deserve a man like me." It wasn't shouted, it wasn't angry. It was casual, careless, like he was commenting on the weather. For a second, I actually thought I misheard. "What did you just say?" He leaned back, still smiling. "I mean, come on, Andrea. You're nice, but I could have done better. I settled too soon, maybe." The room went quiet. Even the hum of the refrigerator faded. I stared at him, the man I'd sacrificed weekends for the one I'd comforted, through every failed deal, every tantrum about his boss. I thought of every night I stayed awake, waiting for his text, every apology I made for things that weren't my fault. He went back to scrolling, like my silence was an inconvenience. That's when I felt something inside me go still, not shattered, not burning, just still. I stood up slowly without a word. He didn't even glance up as I picked up my bag. "Where are you going?" he asked finally, half amused. "Home," I said. "Andrea?" "Don't be dramatic." I was joking, but it wasn't a joke. We both knew it. I walked to the door. Behind me, his voice followed, smug and lazy. "You'll call me tomorrow. You always do." I didn't answer. Outside, the night air hit my face like cold water. The city lights blurred my reflection, faint in the window of my car, mascara smudged, hands trembling, heart pounding. I sat there for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. I wasn't crying, not yet. I just felt tired. Tired of explaining myself to someone who never really listened, tired of pretending that his indifference didn't hurt. In that silence, I realized something. I had been loving him the way people love fire, hoping to stay warm without getting burned. But Scott, he never wanted warmth. He wanted worship. I didn't text him that night. I didn't call the next morning. He didn't either. For days we floated in silence, his ego certain I'd crawl back mine, slowly discovering that maybe I didn't need to. But silence is funny. It's not empty. It echoes. It fills every corner with memories you didn't ask to relive. The way he'd laugh and touch my hair when we first met. The nights he'd talk about his dreams about us. The first time he said he loved me, it had felt like sunlight. Now, remembering it felt like looking directly at something that used to glow and realizing it was just neon bright, fake temporary. I started to see the cracks I had ignored. The way he always took up space in every conversation. How I learned to make myself smaller so he could feel bigger. The way I apologized first, even when he was the one who crossed the line. I remembered the night I stayed up all night helping him finish a pitch because he was behind on work, and the next day he didn't even thank me. He just said, "You should have fixed the slides better." All of it hit at once, the little wounds that never bled until now. And for the first time in 2 years, I let myself feel it, all of it. The anger, the grief, the humiliation of realizing I had given everything to someone who thought I was average. But mixed with the ache was something else: relief. Because when someone shows you how little they value you, you don't have to guess anymore. You just have to leave. That night, I made a quiet promise to myself I would stop fighting to be seen by someone who preferred looking elsewhere. If he thought I didn't deserve him, fine. Maybe I deserved better. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the city outside my window. The world kept spinning, cars kept passing, life kept happening like my heartbreak didn't even register. And maybe that was the point. The universe doesn't pause for broken hearts. It just keeps moving, waiting for you to catch up. I wasn't ready to move yet, but for the first time, I wasn't waiting for him to notice. I closed my eyes and whispered to the darkness, "You're right, Scott. I don't deserve a man like you." Then softly, almost smiling, I deserve peace. It's strange how silence can feel heavier than words. After that night, Scott didn't call. Neither did I. But he didn't have to. I knew him well enough to know his silence wasn't guilt. It was arrogance. He thought he was teaching me a lesson, that if he ignored me long enough, I'd come crawling back like I always did. But this time I didn't. The first week was the hardest. My phone stayed quiet, and every vibration made my heart leap before disappointment settled back in. I'd tell myself I didn't care, but at night I'd scroll through old photos. The vacations, the coffee dates, the way he used to look at me like I was the only person in the room. I realized I had mistaken attention for affection. Scott's gaze was never about me. It was about the reflection of himself he saw in my eyes. By week 2, the loneliness turned to clarity. I stopped checking my phone, stopped rehearsing imaginary arguments in my head. I just stopped trying. And when you stop trying, you start noticing all the things you ignored before. The way he'd always forget his wallet at restaurants. The way I'd rearrange my schedule to fit his, but he never once did the same. The way he'd call me clingy for asking where he was, but show up furious if I didn't answer his text fast enough. I had been living in his orbit for so long that I forgot I had a world of my own. A month passed before I saw him again. It was at our mutual friend's birthday, Claire's, at a rooftop bar downtown. I almost didn't go. Something in me wanted to avoid the scene, the gossip, the way people's eyes would flicker with pity when they looked at me. But another part of me, the part that was done hiding, wanted to see him one last time, if only to remind myself why I walked away. I showed up late wearing a simple black dress. I didn't plan to look impressive, but when I caught my reflection in the mirror behind the bar, I realized I looked calm, like someone who'd finally stopped bleeding. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the music, it all felt distant until I heard his voice. Smooth, loud, confident. I turned, and there he was, Scott, and on his arm, a woman I didn't recognize. Tall, sleek, dressed in red with that same air of performance he loved so much. He didn't see me at first. He was too busy holding court, flashing that same rehearsed smile that once melted me. People laughed at his stories. The woman laughed the loudest. I stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, feeling something I hadn't expected, not pain, not jealousy, just pity. It wasn't until he noticed me that his charm faltered. His eyes flicked my way, and for a split second I saw surprise, maybe even discomfort. Then he smirked, recovered, and slipped an arm tighter around the woman's waist. Of course, he had to win the scene. The showman never leaves the stage. I turned to leave, but Claire stopped me, dragging me toward their group before I could refuse. Andrea. "You remember Scott, right?" she said, smiling too brightly. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice even. "I remember." The woman in red extended a hand, all polished confidence. "Hi, I'm Vanessa. Nice to meet you." My smile was polite, controlled. But Scott couldn't stand polite. He thrived on reaction. "So how have you been?" he asked, sipping his drink like we were casual acquaintances. "Good," I said. "Peaceful." That word peaceful landed like a dart. His smirk wavered. "Well, you look different," he said after a beat. "Different good or different bad?" He hesitated. "Different," he repeated, shrugging like it didn't matter. I was about to walk away when Vanessa leaned into him and whispered something that made him laugh loud, performative. And that laugh, that show of it, did something to me. Not anger, not heartbreak, just confirmation. He hadn't changed. He probably never would. I turned to Claire. "I'll be outside for a bit. Too warm in here." She nodded, sympathetic. Outside, the night air carried the faint hum of the city. I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath since he walked in. My hands were trembling slightly, not from sadness, but from adrenaline, the body's leftover response to old wounds. I was halfway through calming down when the door opened behind me. Of course. Scott stepped out alone this time. He leaned against the railing beside me, silent for a moment, trying to find the right words to sound casual. So he began, "You're avoiding me now." I didn't look at him. "I'm standing in the open. You came to me." He chuckled softly. "Still sharp, still arrogant," I replied. His smirk returned the same one from that night. "Relax, Andrea. You don't have to act so cold. We were good together, weren't we?" "We were convenient for you," I said quietly. "That's not the same thing." He frowned. "You always twist things." "Do I? Or do you just hate hearing yourself out loud?" The silence between us stretched. He sighed dramatically like I was the exhausting one. "You've changed," he said finally. "Thank you," I answered. He looked at me, then really looked. There was something unreadable in his eyes, maybe realization, maybe resentment, but he wouldn't say sorry. Scott didn't do apologies. Instead, he said the one thing he thought would still hurt me. "You'll regret walking away, Andrea. You won't find someone who understands you like I did." I turned to him, slowly met his gaze, and said calm and steady, "Maybe not. But at least I'll find someone who doesn't humiliate me to feel powerful." For once, he didn't have a comeback. He stared, waiting for me to crumble, to cry, to beg like before. But I just stepped past him, heels clicking against the concrete, each sound a reminder of my control, returning step by step. As I reached the door, I paused and looked back once. He was still leaning there, arms crossed, pretending not to care, but his jaw was tight, his posture defensive. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Inside, laughter filled the air. Again, real laughter this time. Not forced, not filtered through his shadow. My friends greeted me with smiles, unaware of the quiet battle that had just ended outside. And just like that, something shifted in me. Not victory, not relief. Just the quiet knowledge that I had finally stopped orbiting around him. That night, as I drove home through the sleeping city, I replayed his words, "You don't deserve a man like me." He was right in a way. I didn't deserve someone like him. I deserved better, and soon I would become it. People say time heals everything, but that's not true. Time doesn't heal, it just gives pain a different shape. Some mornings it's dull like background noise. Some nights it hits you out of nowhere, sharp and fresh again. That's how it was for me, after Scott. At first, everything reminded me of him. The coffee shop on Fifth where we used to meet. The smell of his cologne on the jacket he forgot to take back. Even certain ones I hadn't realized I'd memorized just from sitting beside him in his car. I tried to distract myself, but grief has a cruel way of filling silence with echoes. The second week after the party, I came home to my empty apartment and just sat there. No music, no TV, no noise. Just me and the hum of the refrigerator. It was strange, the quiet that used to feel lonely now felt clean, uncluttered. For 2 years, my life had revolved around someone else's moods, someone else's calendar. I didn't know who I was without him, but I was about to find out. I started small. Morning runs before work. Painting again, even though the canvases always ended up messy. Reorganizing the apartment until it started to feel like mine again, not a museum of us. The first thing to go were the photos. I didn't tear them. I just placed them in a shoebox and taped it shut. Closure doesn't need violence. Sometimes it's just a gentle decision enough. At work, people noticed the change before I did. "New haircut," my coworker Liam asked one morning. "Something like that," I said, sipping my coffee. He smiled. "Looks good on you. You seem lighter." That word stuck with me. Lighter. Not happier, not freer, but lighter. As if some invisible weight had finally lifted and I could breathe properly for the first time in years. Still, healing isn't linear. Some nights I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and reach for my phone before remembering there was no one to text, no one waiting for my goodnight. Other nights I'd scroll through social media, catch glimpses of Scott's new posts, the fake smiles, the weekend trips with Vanessa, and feel that familiar twist in my stomach. I'd tell myself not to look, but curiosity has claws. One evening, I stopped mid-scroll and asked myself a hard question. What are you hoping to find? Proof he missed me. Evidence that he didn't. Either answer would hurt. So I closed the app, deleted it, and went for a walk instead. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement, and for once, I didn't feel small in the world. I felt part of it, messy, uncertain, alive. Weeks turned into months. I joined a weekend pottery class. I reconnected with old friends, people I'd quietly pushed away while orbiting Scott's world. I even started saying yes to spontaneous things again, late-night karaoke, random road trips, dancing badly at weddings. Every yes felt like a tiny rebellion against the girl I used to be, the one who waited by the phone, who swallowed her hurt to keep someone else comfortable. And somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Scott, not even at myself. Anger had kept me company for a while. It made me feel strong, made me feel in control. But it was just another tether to him. Letting it go felt terrifying, but freeing. One Sunday morning, I found myself repainting the walls of my living room. The color had faded that dull beige he'd once said looked classy. I replaced it with something warmer, softer, a shade called Sunrise Blush. As the brush slid across the wall, I caught my reflection in the window. Hair messy shirt, splattered with paint music humming from the radio. And for the first time, I smiled and thought, this is what peace looks like. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. It was a quiet victory, one I'd earned without him. Every so often, I'd bump into mutual friends. They'd mention him casually. Scott and Vanessa. Oh, they're fine, I think. Or, he's been kind of off lately, haven't seen him much. I'd nod, feign disinterest, and change the topic, but inside I felt nothing. Not relief, not revenge, just neutrality. That was new for me. That was growth. I did catch one photo of them by accident once. Someone had tagged me in a post that included them in the background. Scott looking away, Vanessa talking to someone else. His eyes looked tired. The charm was still there, but it was brittle now, like paint cracking under a smile. I didn't screenshot it, didn't zoom in, didn't send it to anyone. I just scrolled past. That simple motion, that tiny act of indifference felt like an entire chapter closing. There's a strange kind of peace that comes when you stop needing closure from the person who hurt you. You start realizing closure isn't something they give, it's something you claim. And I was claiming mine one quiet morning at a time. Sometimes I'd wonder if he ever thought about me, if the silence ever got to him the way it used to suffocate me. But then I'd think he probably did. Scott couldn't stand silence. He needed an audience, and I had finally stopped performing. The next time my phone buzzed with a notification, I didn't even glance at it right away. I was too busy laughing over brunch with friends, sunlight spilling across the table, my coffee cooling beside me. I didn't know it then, but that small, unbothered moment, that decision to stay present, was what real healing looked like. Not moving on overnight, not pretending nothing hurt, just learning how to live with the echoes until they faded into the background. That night before bed, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, tired, calm, alive. And I whispered almost without thinking, I forgive you, Scott, but I'll never go back. Then I turned off the light, crawled into bed, and slept without dreaming of him for the first time in months. The silence lasted longer than I expected. Months passed, and Scott's name became something that floated in conversations like dust in sunlight, visible only if I looked too closely. I didn't. I was done searching for pieces of him in places I'd already cleaned out. But ghosts have their own timing. They don't knock before entering. They just reappear. It started with a message I didn't expect. A number I didn't recognize. Hey, it's me. Been thinking about you. How are you? I stared at it for a long minute. My stomach didn't drop. My pulse didn't quicken. Nothing. Just a dull hum of recognition, like hearing a song you used to love and realizing it no longer fits the rhythm of your life. Old me would have replied. Old me would have wanted to sound strong, detached, forgiving. But the new me, she pressed delete. A week later, another message came. Longer this time. I know I messed up. I was confused. Vanessa wasn't what I thought she was. You were the only one who really cared. I miss us. I didn't reply. Not because I was cruel. Because I was done. You can't reheat a meal that was never cooked properly in the first place. The next attempt was a call. A private number. I let it ring. Once, twice, then voicemail. His voice, too soft, too careful, filled the silence of my kitchen. Look, I know I hurt you. I know I said things I didn't mean, but can we just talk, just once? I just need to see you. I listened, then saved it. Not because I wanted him back, but because it reminded me how far the tables had turned. Weeks passed. My life kept moving. Work was busy, weekends full. I started seeing someone new, not romantically, not yet. Just a coworker, Ben, with a quiet sense of humor and the kind of eyes that actually listened when you spoke. It was easy, light, nothing like the constant tension of Scott. And maybe that's what triggered him, because right when peace started to feel natural, he broke it again. Friday night, 9:42 p.m. Another message, this one dripping with venom. Wow, so this is who you are now. You can't even give me the decency of a reply after everything I gave you. You think you're too good for me now. You'll regret this. I remember reading it while sitting on my couch, eating cold pizza, watching a movie. I didn't even feel anger, just this quiet, almost pitying laugh that slipped out. Because that was Scott, the man who couldn't stand not being the center of attention. When charm failed, he reached for control. I didn't block him. I just muted the number, because indifference, I learned, was a far greater punishment than anger. That weekend, I went to brunch with my friends. Laughter, sunshine, mimosas. I felt light again. Claire mentioned almost casually, "Oh, did you hear Vanessa moved out of Scott's place?" I paused mid-sip. "Really?" "Yeah. Apparently he was using her. Borrowed money, never paid it back. Typical Scott." I didn't respond. I didn't gloat. But deep down, there was a small, bittersweet satisfaction, not in his downfall, but in the proof that life catches up to people like him eventually. You don't need revenge. The universe does the heavy lifting. Later that night, when I came home, I replayed his voicemail one last time. The shaky apology, the fake remorse, the desperate tone that sounded less like love and more like fear of being forgotten. I stood by the window, city lights glowing in the distance, and whispered to the empty room, "You don't miss me, Scott. You miss having someone to drain." Then I pressed delete. The message vanished, and with it the last string tying him to me. But the ghost wasn't done. Not yet. 2 weeks later, I was walking through a bookstore, my new favorite place of peace, when I saw him. It was almost cinematic how ordinary the moment was. He stood in the next aisle browsing self-help books of all things. He looked smaller. The confidence that once wrapped around him like armor was gone. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair unkempt. He noticed me before I noticed him, and I could see the flicker of panic cross his face. "Andrea," his voice cracked slightly. "Wow, you look amazing." I nodded politely. "Hi, Scott. How have you been?" "Good," I said simply. "Really good." He hesitated, shifting awkwardly. "I've been meaning to—" "Don't," I interrupted, not unkindly. "You said enough already." For a moment, his mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but then he saw it. Saw the calm in my face, that he couldn't shake the steadiness he once mistook for weakness. He looked down. "I'm sorry, Andrea." I nodded. "I know, that was all. No anger, no speech. Just truth." He stepped aside, and I walked past him, light, certain, whole. That night I wrote in my journal for the first time in months. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering, without trembling. I thought that was the end. But one last echo of him would still come before the story truly closed. And when it did, it would happen. Where it all began at another party, surrounded by the same faces, the same laughter, but this time with a different ending. Because the ghost wasn't the one who needed closure anymore. I was. I didn't plan to see him again. But life, in its dark sense of irony, always brings people full circle, not for drama, but for clarity. It was late spring when Claire messaged me, birthday dinner at Solis next Saturday. "You better come, everyone's been asking about you." I hesitated. Everyone in Claire's world often included ghosts, but something in me wanted to go, not to prove anything, not to see him, just to confirm what I already knew, that I could be in the same room as Scott and feel absolutely nothing. So I went. The restaurant was one of those rooftop places that glowed under string lights, laughter echoing between soft jazz and the clinking of glasses. I wore a cream dress, simple, understated. Not armor, not bait, just me. When I walked in, heads turned, not because I was trying to be seen, but because I wasn't hiding anymore. Claire squealed and hugged me. Finally. "You look incredible," I laughed. "You always say that when I show up on time." The night felt light, effortless, until I heard that voice, lower, slower now, like it had forgotten how to fill a room. "Andrea." I turned. There he was, Scott. But he wasn't him anymore, not the glowing magnetic figure who used to command attention. He looked dimmed. His smile was hesitant, his posture unsure. The man who once couldn't bear silence was now swallowed by it. "Hey," I said, softly polite. "Nothing more." He blinked as if expecting warmth. "You came. Claire's birthday. Why wouldn't I?" He nodded, eyes flicking over me, searching for the version of me he used to control. But she was gone. We stood there for a moment, the noise of the party moving around us like a tide. Finally he said, "You look good. Thanks." "You always did," he added quickly, a reflex, maybe a grasp at familiarity. I smiled faintly. "And you look okay." He gave a small laugh. "Fair." I turned to leave, but he reached out. "Wait. Can we talk? Just a minute?" Something inside me wanted to refuse, not out of spite, but because I didn't owe him anything. But another part of me, the storyteller in my own head, wanted the scene to end properly. So I nodded. Outside. The rooftop air was cool, the city glittering below us. The same kind of night he once told me he loved because it made him feel important, as if the world was watching. But tonight no one was. He shoved his hands into his pockets, nervous. "I've been meaning to say this for a while. I was wrong, Andrea, about everything." I said nothing. He kept going. "I thought I needed excitement. I thought I wanted someone who'd challenge me, make me feel alive. But that wasn't it. I just didn't know how to be loved quietly." I studied him. The words sounded rehearsed, but the tremor in his voice didn't. He continued. "Vanessa left, said I was selfish, said I didn't know how to give back. And she was right. You were right. You gave me everything, and I treated it like it was nothing." His eyes glistened. "I've been thinking about you a lot, about us. And I realized something. You were the only one who ever made me feel enough." The old me would have melted at that line. The new me just breathed. "Scott," I said quietly, "I believe you mean that." He looked up, hope flickering. "But meaning something doesn't undo what's been done." He frowned. "So that's it? You can't forgive me?" "I did forgive you," I said. "That's why I'm standing here without shaking." He stared, trying to read me, maybe searching for anger or sadness, something he could hold on to. But there was nothing left for him to grab. "You once told me I didn't deserve a man like you," I said. He winced. "Andrea," I held up a hand. "You were right. I don't. I deserve someone kind, someone who doesn't confuse cruelty for confidence, someone who doesn't measure love by how quiet I can be." He swallowed hard. "So there's really nothing left between us." "There's peace," I said, "and that's better." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The city buzzed below, alive and different. He finally whispered, "You'll regret this one day." I smiled softly. "No, Scott. I regretted you once. I don't do that anymore." And then I walked away. Inside, the lights felt warmer. Claire handed me a slice of cake, oblivious to the weight that had just lifted. Someone was telling a joke, and laughter filled the air. It was easy to join in. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a supporting character in someone else's story. I was the author now. Later that night, as I stood at the railing, city wind tugging at my hair, I thought about everything. The smirk, the silence, the ghosts, the forgiveness. It all led here, not to revenge, not to triumph, to peace. He once said I didn't deserve a man like him. He was right, but not in the way he thought. Because I deserve better, and for the first time I finally believed it. The weeks after that night felt like an exhale I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. Everything slowed down my mornings, my thoughts, even my heartbeat. It wasn't numbness, it was calm. For so long, I had lived inside the noise of someone else's approval, trying to be enough, to be seen, to be chosen. Scott had been the loudest part of my life, and when he left, the silence terrified me. But now that silence was mine. I woke up early again, made coffee without rushing, sat by the window and watched sunlight creep across the walls I had painted myself. The air smelled like fresh linen and vanilla candles instead of his cologne. It was simple, ordinary, but ordinary felt like luxury after chaos. People around me noticed the difference. Claire said, "You've got this glow, like you're finally comfortable in your own skin." I smiled. I am. It wasn't that I'd found someone new. It was that I'd finally stopped looking for someone to fix what I had the power to heal myself. One night, I came home from work and found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name in familiar handwriting. I didn't have to open it to know who it was from. Scott. I stood there for a moment, the cool paper trembling slightly between my fingers. Then I smiled, tore it in half, and threw it away. Some doors don't need slamming, they just need closing. Instead of going inside right away, I walked to the park down the street. It was quiet, the kind of night that makes you think the world is whispering instead of shouting. Kids' laughter echoed faintly from a distance, the air carried the scent of jasmine, and somewhere someone was playing a soft guitar. I sat on a bench, watching the streetlights blink on one by one. My phone buzzed with a message from Ben Still. Up for coffee tomorrow, I smiled and replied, "Definitely." Not because I was ready for love again, but because I wasn't scared of it anymore. The next morning over coffee, Ben talked about his failed marriage, how it taught him that love isn't a rescue mission. I listened quietly, and for once I didn't feel the need to compare or confess. I just let the conversation flow. Halfway through, he said something I'll never forget. Sometimes we confuse love with endurance, but love isn't about how much pain you can survive. It's about how safe you feel when you stop surviving. It struck me not because it was poetic, but because it was true. I had spent years surviving Scott calling it love. Now I was learning what peace felt like when it wasn't conditional. Weeks turned into a rhythm. Work, coffee, laughter, small adventures. Ben never tried to fill the silence. He shared it with me easily, and I realized that was what I'd been missing all along, someone who didn't need to be impressed, just understood. But the real freedom wasn't about him, it was about me. I stopped apologizing for being too quiet, too emotional, too cautious. I stopped asking for permission to rest, to take space, to be alone. I stopped needing to prove that I was strong, because peace, I learned, is the quietest kind of strength. One Sunday, while cleaning out my closet, I found Scott's old hoodie, the one I'd forgotten I even had. I held it for a moment, half expecting the old ache to return. It didn't. It was just fabric, now faded and meaningless. I folded it neatly, placed it in a donation box, and whispered to the empty room, "Someone else can keep you warm now." As I closed the box, I felt that invisible weight finally sliding off for good. That evening I went for a drive. The city lights blurred through the windshield wind, tangling my hair. My favorite song humming from the speakers. I didn't have a destination, just motion, just freedom. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes, bright lips curved in a small, knowing smile. That's when it hit me. I didn't need a grand ending, a dramatic speech, or a perfect revenge. My closure was this peace that didn't depend on anyone else's apology. I rolled the window down, let the air rush in, and whispered half to myself, half to the past. "You were a lesson, Scott, not the ending." And for the first time in years, the words didn't hurt. They felt honest. They felt final. Back home, I lit a candle and opened my journal, the same one I used to fill with pain. Now, I wrote something different. The quiet isn't lonely anymore. It's mine. And maybe that's what healing really means. Not forgetting the story, but learning how to tell it without breaking. I closed the notebook, turned off the lights, and stood by the window again. The city below shimmered alive, endless forgiving. I wasn't just free of